We all know she didn't really lead anything, she just stuck around long enough. That's what Madison said. Into a live microphone, in front of the entire division. And no one stopped her. It happened during the company's mid-year summit, a glass-walled event hall overlooking the city, catered lunch stations, round tables draped in cream linen. Everyone wore their polished shoes and networking smiles. I was sitting at table 5, across from 2 junior analysts who whispered about salary bands between bites of spinach quiche. I just unfolded my napkin when I heard Madison's voice cut through the chatter, clear and sugar-sweet from the podium. She was standing beside Paul, our VP, presenting a new team structure for the upcoming fiscal cycle. New initiatives, new leads, and apparently, new narratives. The room went still after she said it. Not because anyone gasped. They didn't. That would have meant someone disagreed. No, what came was worse. That subtle shuffle of papers, a polite sip of water, a few careful glances away from me, like I wasn't there, like I hadn't been there for 7 years. Paul laughed. Actually laughed. Then he leaned toward the mic and added, "Well, you know what they say. Loyalty doesn't always mean leadership." And that's when I knew. They weren't just restructuring, they were rewriting history, erasing me, quietly, confidently, like I had been a placeholder they were finally brave enough to remove. I stared at the back of Madison's head as she moved through her slide deck, each bullet point a distorted version of the systems I had built. She never looked at me once, but Paul did. Only briefly. Long enough to smile like he'd won something. I didn't move. Not a blink, not a breath. Because if I moved even slightly, I might do something they'd call emotional, something they'd spin later into. See, she couldn't handle transition. So I stayed still, a quiet statue in a navy blue blazer while everyone clapped for Madison as she wrapped her presentation. She looked so polished up there. Her dress was corporate but soft, her tone confident, her hand gestures rehearsed. You'd never guess she'd joined less than 18 months ago. Barely understood the difference between indirect and direct P&L the first time I trained her. But now, she was head of collaborative integration. My former title. They hadn't even changed the name. I forced a sip of water. It tasted like dust. Someone nearby coughed. Another person chuckled quietly as Paul announced they'd reevaluated all roles for future scalability. That's what they called it, scalability. They'd carved up my responsibilities like turkey at Thanksgiving and handed them out to newer, younger hires, each with shinier resumes, flashier PowerPoints, and no memory of the days when the system crashed and I stayed overnight, rebuilding processes by hand. I should have seen this coming, but loyalty blinds you in strange ways. You excuse the lack of eye contact. You rationalize the missed meetings. You ignore the fact that your ideas sound better coming from someone else's mouth, until it's too late. And yet, I didn't feel rage. I felt something colder, something sharper. Because somewhere between that first slight and this full erasure, I'd stopped expecting fairness. I'd started documenting. Every system blueprint, every email thread, every team transition log that had my fingerprints all over it. I reached for my bag under the table and let my hand find what I'd slipped in that morning. A thumb drive. Old school. Quiet. Reliable. Paul's voice was still echoing through the mic. Sometimes we have to evolve past what used to work. I stood up. No one noticed at first, and then they did. Eyes tracked me as I stepped away from the table, quiet heels over marble, one calm breath after another. I didn't say a word, didn't need to. But as I walked past Madison, I paused just long enough to look her straight in the eye. Her smile faltered, and that's when I whispered, not loud enough for the mic, but just enough for her. Let's see how well you manage without the people who actually built it. I didn't go home after the summit, I just drove. No music, no destination, just the sound of tires on asphalt and the occasional buzz of a turn signal I didn't follow through on. The city blurred past in shades of concrete and neon. Somewhere between 2 red lights, my mind went backward, like a reflex, not a choice. 7 years. I had given them 7 steady years. When I first joined the company, the department was chaos wrapped in chaos. No workflow, no knowledge management. People were working on overlapping tasks and still missing deadlines. So I stayed late, built templates, created handbooks from scratch, turned tribal knowledge into a repeatable structure. I didn't ask for credit. I just wanted things to work, and they did. Within 6 months, we went from flailing to functional. By year 2, we were winning awards for efficiency. Back then, Paul used to drop by my desk just to say thanks. Just to ask how I got a junior analyst to deliver 3 days early. He told me, "You're the glue. Don't ever change." And I didn't. I was the one who remembered everyone's birthday, the one who covered when someone's kid got sick, the one who mentored new hires, even when it wasn't in my job description. Then came Madison. She was fresh out of a failed startup, all confidence and no context. Paul asked me to show her the ropes. I did. I welcomed her like I would have wanted someone to welcome me. I reviewed her reports, cleaned up her presentations, explained back-end logic without making her feel small. She thanked me once. Just once. But she was quick, eager, and smart enough to know when to stay quiet while people mistook her polish for substance. It started with little things. She'd send out ideas we'd brainstorm together, but worded like they came from her. She'd echo my suggestions in meetings, but faster, louder, more rehearsed. Paul loved it, said she brought fresh energy. I started getting looped in after decisions had already been made. Meetings moved without me. Deadlines shifted while I was mentoring someone else. I told myself it was just transition, growing pains. I kept showing up, kept saying yes, kept filling the gaps, until slowly, they started calling those gaps mine, like I had created the chaos I used to solve. The shift wasn't sudden. That's what made it cruel. No doors slammed, no angry emails, just less. Less eye contact from Paul during meetings, less involvement in projects I once led, less space in the weekly roundup, my name moving further down, then disappearing altogether. One morning, I opened an internal memo on Q3 restructuring. There were charts, timelines, new team leads. My role was listed as support. Not head of operations, not process architect. Just support. I sat in my office and stared at that word until the screen blurred. That same week, I found out from the receptionist, that there was a leadership dinner that evening. Paul was hosting. Invitations went out a week before. I never got one. When I asked him casually the next day, he just blinked. "Oh? I thought you were swamped. Madison said you were deep into the back-end audit, didn't want to interrupt." Madison, she'd learned the most dangerous form of sabotage, one that sounded helpful. She said you were too busy. She thought you'd want to avoid extra stress. She offered to cover for you. And I had let her. Because I was the reliable one, the workhorse, the one who would always just handle it. But what I didn't see, what I refused to admit, was how they had started to use that against me. There was a pitch presentation coming up for a huge potential client, our biggest of the year. I had built the deck, done the data mapping, aligned the integration timeline. Madison gave the presentation. I was asked to support logistics, meaning print the agendas, test the projector, and stand in the back in case the coffee ran out. And afterward, when the client shook her hand and said, "Impressive work," Madison didn't correct him. Paul was standing right there. He didn't correct him either. That night, I went home and opened my inbox. There was an internal thank you email thread going around. I wasn't on it. But the junior analyst I trained was. Madison CC'd him with a note. "Thanks for helping me pull this all together." He replied, "Wouldn't have made sense without your flow, Madison." I sat there in the dark, my dinner untouched on the table beside me, and thought, is this what happens when you stop making noise? Is this what loyalty looks like from the outside? Quiet, efficient, and easy to push out the back door? But I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I just started keeping copies. Every draft, every original file, every slide deck with metadata intact. I backed up folders, logged timestamps, saved side conversations with clients. Not for revenge, not yet. Just because something deep inside me whispered, they're getting ready to cut you out. And when they do, you're not walking away empty-handed. The breaking point didn't come with a bang. It came with a calendar invite. Subject line, operational streamlining session, mandatory. Sent from Paul's assistant. No context. Just a time, a room, a list of required attendees. My name was on it, so was Madison's. And 3 department leads I used to work with daily, before they started calling me legacy support. I showed up early, it's what I always did. Old habit, old reflex. The room was sterile. Long table, blank whiteboard, bottled water lined up like soldiers. I sat near the middle, quietly sipping coffee that had gone bitter from the burner. They trickled in after. Some nodded, Some smiled faintly. Madison arrived last, in a blush blazer and a folder thick with printed slides. Paul didn't waste time. "We're consolidating," he said, pacing slowly at the front of the room. "Cross-functional integration is the future. We need fresh leadership, voices that understand today's workforce." He didn't look at me, not once. Instead, he clicked the remote in his hand and brought up a slide that made my throat tighten. A new organizational chart. Departments I had helped build, split up and reassigned. Reporting lines rerouted. My box, gone. There was no transition plan, no soft landing. Just a missing rectangle and the word TBD where my title used to be. I don't remember breathing. I remember gripping my pen hard enough to leave marks in my palm. I remember Madison speaking confidently about efficiency metrics and generational alignment, using bullet points I had written 6 months ago. No one questioned it. No one turned toward me. Until Paul closed the laptop and said, "We'll begin implementation next week. For now, if anyone has questions, speak with Madison directly." And that was it. A career folded into silence. After the meeting, I didn't go back to my desk. I walked down to the loading dock. Stood there next to stacks of cardboard and the hum of the delivery truck engines. Let the noise drown out the part of me that wanted to scream. That night, I updated my personal cloud folder, reorganized every documentation log I had saved, matched timelines, cross-referenced names, and then I made one phone call to a woman named Grace. She had been my first intern. Now she was a regional lead at a firm across the city. She picked up on the first ring. I didn't cry. I didn't complain. I just said, "Hey, remember when you said if I ever needed a place to land, your door was open?" She said, "You don't sound like you're landing. You sound like you're launching." I didn't sleep that night. Not because I was anxious, because I was clear. There's a strange kind of calm that comes when you stop begging to be seen. When you realize they've already decided who they think you are, and it no longer matters whether you prove them wrong. The next morning, I arrived at the office early, even earlier than usual. I sat in the empty break room with a legal pad and a pen, writing down every department contact I still had leverage with. Not titles, not job functions. People. People I'd trained, backed up, fought for, stayed late for. People who still ran their divisions like clockwork because of the systems I built. I didn't ask for anything. I just sent a simple message to each of them. "Hey, quick question. Would you have 10 minutes later today?" Not about the company, about what comes next. Some didn't reply, but most did, because even if I wasn't in a title anymore, they still trusted the person who'd never let them fall. At 11:04 a.m., I got a ping from Jamie in IT. She was one of the few who still made eye contact in meetings. A quiet coder with a sharp sense of fairness and a memory like a vault. Her message was only one sentence. "You may want to check the back-end author logs on the Q2 proposal doc." I knew what that meant. I logged into the shared system, found the document Madison had submitted as her own last week, and clicked Version History. There it was. My name. Timestamped. 6 weeks prior. Every section, every note. The final version had a different author, Madison, but the bones were mine, and that was just one file. By the time I finished pulling together the originals, the side-by-side comparisons, the proposal drafts with metadata, I had enough to raise more than just eyebrows. But I didn't send it to Paul, or HR, or anyone inside that building. I sent it to Grace, and she sent back 2 words, "Let's talk." That Friday, during what should have been a normal wrap-up meeting, Paul walked in with a self-satisfied grin and announced the company had just secured a pilot deal with a major healthcare client, thanks to Madison's innovative proposal and bold leadership. He even had the nerve to ask everyone to give her a round of applause. She stood up modestly, smiled, tucked a strand of hair behind her ear like she was humbled, like she hadn't taken a victory lap over something built on my time, my thinking, my name. The clapping died down. Paul turned to dismiss the room, and that's when the voice came, not mine. From the corner of the room, Will, a soft-spoken systems manager who rarely said anything unless it was directly technical, cleared his throat and asked, "Hey, quick one. Was that the same proposal Lisa had mapped back in April?" Dead silence. Madison froze. Paul's face flickered, just for a second. I stayed seated, didn't flinch, didn't speak. Will turned toward me, half shrugging like it was an innocent question. I only ask because I remember Lisa walking me through that automation path during testing. Didn't realize it had been reassigned. Everyone looked at me then, and I looked back at Madison. Not angry, not smug, just quiet. Because the truth didn't need a microphone, it just needed air. The annual strategy summit was held at the downtown hotel's penthouse ballroom. Glass ceiling, navy velvet curtains, and the faint scent of citrus-polished wood. Everyone was there. The board, senior partners, regional heads from out of state. Paul stood at the podium, radiating confidence, a silk tie knotted like armor. He had just finished a long, drawn-out thank you speech, using words like evolution and next-gen agility. Then he gestured toward Madison. "She represents the future of this company," he said. "Sharp, adaptable, and committed to growth. This new structure wouldn't have happened without her." Applause erupted. I didn't move. Madison took the stage in a soft ivory suit, clipboard in hand, pretending to be bashful. She scanned the crowd like a bride walking down the aisle, eyes moist, lips pressed in modest gratitude. "I'm honored," she began, "but this wasn't just me. This was a team effort. And it proves one thing. When we let go of outdated systems and trust in fresh leadership, we rise." She let the silence hang like a cue for another wave of clapping. It never came, because from the back row someone cleared their throat. It was Jamie, the IT analyst. She stood, nervously clutching a tablet. "Before we all move forward," she said softly, "there's something I think we should clarify." Paul frowned. "Jamie, now's not the time." But Jamie didn't stop. She turned the tablet toward the big screen. A file loaded, a version history log, showing edits on the so-called Madison proposal. Every entry before the final one was mine. Time-stamped, annotated, authored, and then, last-minute cosmetic changes. Madison's name inserted, fonts shifted, one bullet point rephrased. The room went still. Jamie added almost apologetically, "I just thought transparency was part of leadership too." Paul's mouth opened, closed. All eyes shifted. I stood. Not rushed, not theatrical, just steady. "Thank you, Jamie," I said calmly. "That's one file. There are others." I walked to the podium, not toward it, but past it, toward the projection laptop, plugged in my own drive. No words, just clicks. Slide after slide appeared. Strategic timelines, integration models, retention plans, all with metadata showing months of work. My work. Cross-referenced with Madison's recent reports, almost identical, word for word. But it wasn't just about stolen credit. It was what I said next that shifted the ground beneath them. "I've accepted an offer," I told the room, voice firm but quiet, to lead a competing firm's new innovation branch. I wasn't going to announce it yet, but I figured you all deserved context. Gasps. I let them sink in. "I won't be going alone," I added. 3 department heads have chosen to come with me, and a few clients have already signed letters of intent to follow. And then I turned to Paul. "And you're right. Everyone is replaceable, but only if they built nothing worth staying for." You could hear the breath leave the room. Not in a dramatic gasp, but in the kind of quiet that says we didn't see this coming and we probably should have. Paul's face turned the color of wet clay. He tried to regain ground. "Let's not make this personal," he said, raising both hands like a referee. "We appreciate everything you've done for the company, Lisa, truly. But if there's been confusion over attribution..." "Confusion." I cut in gently. "Paul, I built those systems. You thanked me for them 3 years ago. In writing, I have the email." Murmurs rippled across the ballroom. Someone from legal shifted uncomfortably in their seat. Madison's clipboard trembled in her hand. "I wasn't going to make a scene," I continued, "but when you erase 7 years of loyalty and call it progress, you should expect echoes." And then, the unexpected. Will stood up again, the quiet systems manager who had spoken up in the meeting earlier that week. He looked straight at Madison and said, "I backed up the integration logs 2 weeks ago. They were under your folder, Lisa, not hers." Another murmur. This one louder, sharper. A third voice, Sonia from Regional Operations, stood and added, "Honestly, I thought something was off. Lisa coached me through the cross-team planning last quarter, and then suddenly, Madison took it over like she'd always been there." Paul opened his mouth. "I think we need to pause this and..." "No," said Grace. Her voice came from the door. Everyone turned. She stepped into the room, confident, crisp in a charcoal suit, holding a briefcase with her firm's logo, Stratcore Solutions. "Sorry to interrupt," she said. "I'm Grace Morgan, Lisa's new partner." I came today out of courtesy, but it seems courtesy's already been discarded. Paul blinked. This is highly inappropriate. I agree, Grace said smoothly. You just lost 3 department heads, 5 client accounts, and your internal infrastructure architect in the same hour. That's a lot for a Friday. She looked around. But hey, maybe Madison can rebuild it all. After all, she's so adaptable. The sarcasm sliced. Madison's face paled. I think this meeting's over, I said softly. I'd like to exit with dignity, something this company used to understand. And I turned. Walked down the center aisle. My heels echoed against the marble floor. As I passed Paul, he tried one last reach. Lisa, can we speak privately? I didn't stop walking. You had 7 years to speak to me with respect. You wasted them. I didn't look back, but I felt it. The hush, the realization, the weight of silence shifting. Not just toward me, away from them. The moment I reached the elevator, the doors opened like they had been waiting for me all along. And as they closed behind me, I saw through the narrowing gap. Madison standing frozen, her clipboard drooping like a wilting flower. Paul rubbing his temple, already sweating through his collar. Half the room staring at the floor, the other half at me. I didn't smile. Not yet. But my phone buzzed in my bag. A message from one of the clients. We're coming with you. Just say when. It didn't feel victorious. Not at first. When the door clicked shut behind Paul, the room didn't cheer. It didn't exhale. It just fell silent. People stayed in their seats, eyes wide, hands frozen in place like maybe, just maybe, if they didn't move they could pretend they hadn't applauded him 15 minutes earlier. A few shifted in their chairs. Someone coughed. I could hear the clink of a spoon tapping porcelain, nervous hands pretending to be casual, but no one looked directly at me. Not yet. Then Jenna stood up. She was the quiet one in marketing, always polite, always on time. She cleared her throat and said, I just want to say thank you for not letting him speak for all of us. And that's when it started. One by one people began standing, not loudly, not in a wave, just slowly, respectfully. Someone from finance nodded and said, We knew, we just didn't know how to say it. Someone else added, He made it clear what would happen if we did. I didn't speak. I just sat there, still holding the folder I'd dropped in the middle of the twist. I hadn't picked it up. It didn't matter now. Later that afternoon, I was called into the main conference room. The real one, where glass walls kept nothing private. The CEO was waiting, Melissa Hayes. She hadn't said much in the years I'd been there. Too high up, too far removed. She stood when I walked in. That alone told me something had shifted. Have a seat, she said gently. I owe you an apology. We missed what was right in front of us. I didn't flinch, I just waited. She continued, You've built the backbone of 3 departments, systems, people, continuity. Paul rebranded your stability as stagnation. I believed him, and I'm sorry. And then she asked something I hadn't expected. What would it take for you to stay? I looked at her. Not with anger. Not even triumph. Just clarity. For the first time in a long while, I wasn't afraid of what would happen if I said what I really thought. So I asked, if I say yes, do I get to lead, or just fix what someone else breaks again? Melissa didn't rush to answer. She nodded slowly. You lead. You rebuild. On your terms. She wasn't bluffing. I could feel it. There was a quiet kind of respect in her voice I hadn't heard from anyone in that room before. And still, I said, I'll think about it. I walked out of the room with my head up. Not because I was proud, but because I'd finally stopped asking to be seen. I knew what I was worth now, and I didn't need a job title to prove it. By the end of the week, Paul's access was revoked. There was no dramatic press release, no scorched earth emails, just a quiet footnote in the internal bulletin. Leadership transition, effective, immediately. But the ripple was real. A vendor we'd worked with for years called me privately. We were considering pulling out, she said. We knew something felt off. But now that we know who was really behind the structure, we're staying with you. HR reopened several complaints that had been quietly dismissed before. Turns out I hadn't been the only one Paul had silenced. And one by one, I got emails. From old colleagues who had gone silent during the worst of it. From new hires who'd always watched me from the sidelines. From people who never said anything before, but now wanted to. One read, You didn't just stand up for yourself, you reminded us how to. I didn't stay at the company. I could have. Melissa meant what she said. But I chose something else. I launched my own consultancy 3 months later, with full backing from 2 of our former clients and 3 department leads who handed in their notices and came with me. Not because I asked, because they believed in what we'd built, not what we'd been told to follow. My old office? It stayed empty for a while. They said they wanted to find the right fit. But I knew it wasn't about replacing a person. It was about replacing the silence I'd broken. And the last time I walked past that building, I didn't look up in resentment. I didn't ache for the space I once fought to hold. I just smiled. Because justice isn't always loud. Sometimes it's just quiet satisfaction. The kind that lets you sleep deeply at night, knowing you didn't burn the bridge. You outgrew it. Some endings don't sound like victory. They don't come with fireworks or applause. Sometimes they arrive on a quiet morning, with sunlight stretching across a worn kitchen table and the hum of a coffee maker filling the silence. That's where I am now. It's been 5 months since the fallout. 5 months since I stepped out of that boardroom with the weight lifted and the world watching. But the moment I felt most free wasn't when Daniel was escorted out. It was the morning after, when I woke up and didn't feel small anymore. I spend my mornings walking to work now. Not the corporate tower, no. I opened a small consulting firm downtown, just 3 rooms and a glass door that still sticks when it rains. I named it after my grandmother, who used to say, "Build your own table if they won't give you a seat." Most of the team came with me. Not because I asked, they just showed up. One by one. Said, "We're not here for the title, we're here for the trust." The first few weeks were messy. No shiny HR department to cover the cracks, no corporate budget to cushion mistakes, but every voice was heard, every contribution counted. We laughed more, and when we argued, it was real, it was honest. One afternoon, I found a sticky note on my desk in Maya's handwriting. She's our youngest associate, just 2 years out of school. It said, "I'm glad you didn't stay quiet, it taught me not to." I kept it. Sometimes, that's all it takes. Not a lawsuit, not a speech. Just one choice, to walk forward when they tried to leave you behind. And now every time someone calls me replaceable, I smile. Because they were right about the wrong person. Last week I ran into Brian, the one colleague who never spoke up when things got ugly. He stood across from me at the farmer's market, holding a bag of oranges and guilt in his eyes. He said, "I knew it wasn't right. What they did to you, I should have said something." I didn't flinch, I just nodded. "You still can," I told him. "Start with the next person they try to push out." He looked down, then back up. "You handled it with grace. I don't think I could have." And I told him the truth. I didn't, not always. I just didn't let it break me. Later that evening, as I walked past my old office building, the one with tinted glass and the security badge I once carried like a shield, I paused for a moment. I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel pain. I felt distance. Peaceful. Earned distance. Because justice doesn't always mean revenge. Sometimes it just means stepping into a life where you are no longer afraid of being underestimated. I got home, and my niece was there, coloring at the kitchen counter. She looked up, crayon in hand, and asked, "Auntie, are you a boss now?" I laughed softly. "Something like that." She smiled wide. "Can I work for you when I grow up?" I bent down beside her and whispered, "If you work hard, speak up, and always choose the right thing, even when it's scary, you'll never have to work for anyone." And for the first time in years, I realized I wasn't just building a company. I was building something bigger. A way forward. A space where nobody has to prove they belong. So to those of you watching, if you've ever been silenced, pushed out, or told you were replaceable, this story is yours too. You're not what they called you. You are what you survived and what you build next. You're still here. And that matters more than they'll ever understand. If you've been through something like this, I'd love to hear your story in the comments. And if someone you care about needs this message, send it to them. Quiet strength deserves a voice too. Stick around by subscribing. We tell stories for those who've been quiet too long.